So, a dark light. How I came to that title hopefully will become more clear, but let me just tell you that I like to ride my bike at night when I leave the graduate studios at FAU down the bike path along the canal without my lights on. And this is just something I've always enjoyed my entire life, is peering into the darkness, trying to discern what's there, trying to see what I can't see, but my mind and my brain is telling me stuff is there. And you get this kind of speckly shimmer, night vision, which is also called scotopic vision. And so this peering into the darkness, trying to figure things out, has been with me my entire life. So the most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. And people probably know that it was Einstein who said it. It's the source of all true art and science. And I like to think that my work is a combination of art and science. And art and science used to reside together. They didn't separate it out. And the reason I think art and science is so connected is both of them locate at the thin space between what is known and unknown. Artists go about it differently than scientists, but it's the same location. So I started out my life pretty much in science. So Ursula Le Guin talks about art as a human language that can try to say what a tree or a rock or a river is, to speak humanly for it. She goes on to say science describes accurately from outside, and poetry or art describes accurately from inside. And I think that we're trying to come up with the same answer, which is a description of the world around us and what it feels like to be alive and what it means and what our location is. But we go about it differently. I personally really enjoy the freedom that art gives. So why is there something instead of nothing? This is me. I'm the one on the far left. And my father, who can't believe he had 4 kids in 4 years, he's kind of like, whoa. So we're sitting on our couch, and I was raised in working class family originally, moved to middle class later on, in south side of Chicago, and it was an interesting upbringing. It was a Calvinist upbringing, very rigid, very rigorous, and my father was head elder. So some people say, how come you work so hard? I don't know. So fortunately, something happened for me in 6th grade, and that was the Big Bang. Well, that didn't happen then, but I was told about that theory then, which actually really, truly exploded my mind. And as many of you in the audience are artists, when you go back and you look at your life and you try to figure out why you are the artist that you are and why you make what you make, and you're trying to dig into that answer, you trace it back to what was like some pivotal occurrence. What happened that sort of triggered you to become an artist? Or what was that thing that is the foundation of everything you are as an artist? And for me, it truly was being unsettled by this huge idea of the Big Bang, which was the singularity that brought everything into existence. What my little brain couldn't wrap around was, if the Big Bang made everything, what was there before that? So I don't know how many headaches you have gotten thinking about this stuff, but it perplexes me to this day. So I love Richard Tuttle's statement, we are all born into some narrow experience within limits, but art is the kind of thing that can take us outside of ourselves, free us from those limits. Artists and scientists ask questions to determine our place in the world and look at the unknown. They build metaphors and concepts to offer understandings of our world using abstract thinking to express ideas. Sometimes people don't think scientists do that, but they do, and they use some of the most metaphoric language, like spooky action at a distance, which is that the spin on particles can communicate faster than the speed of light, but to call it spooky action at a distance is so amazing to me. So we both represent the visible and the invisible. And I can't have a lecture without a shout out to my major professor in graduate school, Jules Kirschenbaum. And when he gave a lecture at Drake University, I wrote down what he said. This is one of the quotes from that talk. He was my age then, and I thought he was so old and so profound and so significant. So anyways, I still hold on to what he said though. And that is, if you have really experienced the power of art in a phrase of music, a few words, or a yellow wall, life seems dull and unreal beside it. It is internal, immediate, spasmodic, painful. How many people know what the yellow wall reference is to? The Yellow Wall, Charlotte Perkins Gilman's short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. So if you don't know that short story, it's worth looking up. It's a beautiful short story. Another great quote, it's the difficulty that unites us, the difficulty of making the intangible tangible, of creating a cold form to contain our fervent content. Ever since the Big Bang Theory in 6th grade, my head has spun in a kind of sensuous way among all these possibilities. And I've tried to distill that into the art forms that I make. So those of you who are familiar with my work, this is pretty much what I have been making. This piece, Thirst, has a video of water being poured incessantly into my mouth. And I was thinking about the Oracle of Delphi and the source of knowledge and thirst for knowledge, but I also thought we were also thirsty, and how much do we consume and how much do we waste? So it's all those things. Picture of my studio to show you that not only does the studio transition over time and things accumulate and I need a bigger studio, but that there's always things that one has to attend to outside of making art, which is like, how do you hang these darn things? Fortunately, I have a partner who has a degree in mechanical engineering, and he can do a lot of these moment calculations to see and make sure that things are structurally sound. So most of my life is spent going mark, 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 hatch, hatch, hatch. People say, don't you get tired and bored? No. So this is my bliss. Joseph Campbell talks about bliss in The Power of Myth. This is my bliss. It is when I am fully engaged. So I became an artist because when I was studying science, and the history of this is I never had an art class till I went to college. Went to college without an art class, chemistry major. I'm in a chemistry class, but I met a woman in the dorm who was an artist who thought completely differently than me. And I thought, how could I be a scientist and not understand this kind of thinking? Because to be a scientist, you have to understand the world around you. So I thought I have to get to understand what this art thing is and why she thinks differently. So I took a drawing class. And my mind was so captivated by that. It was when I was most fully alive. It was when I was most engaged. Everything firing all at once. And haven't really looked back since. I'll just show this because it's my recent achievement to have a piece in the collection of the Museum of Arts and Design in New York City. It's a large 60-inch dome. So that was my prehistory. And now I'm going to bring you up to the show that's upstairs and how did I come to that. So I read Black Hole Blues by Jana Levin. She's an astrophysicist. And first of all, a book with a title like that is going to grab you anyways, right? And I love Nova. I mean, I'm a popular scientist person. I don't understand it with any depth, so I will admit to that. But I started reading, and this reading led me to other astrophysicists, many of whom were women, and I didn't know about them. And the reason I was really curious about astrophysicists is because they really try to come up with big theories of everything. They're thinking in really big ways, and sometimes really extremely strange ways. And I find that compelling. So while I don't understand the mathematics of it, or even the deep theory of it, what draws me to these scientists, and particularly these women, is that they thought big. They didn't set boundaries for themselves. And in my art, I realized I wanted to model myself in that way, to not set boundaries for myself. So scotopic vision, which is night vision, led me on an adventure. If Kathy Goncharov was here tonight, she would know the story because I was with her in Italy, and I was staying on the island of Murano, and she just very calmly said, after we had met in Venice for a drink, she said, "Oh, just catch that Vaporetto and transfer at the Rialto Bridge, and you'll be fine." And it was about 10:30 or 11. Unknown to her is the one I needed to catch no longer ran. So by the time I ran across Venice, because the person on the boat said, "Just run across Venice, just don't go left or right." But you can't not do in Venice, right? You hit a bridge, where do you go? Okay, safe. Okay, I get to the other side, get to the lagoon. I'm going to catch the workers' boat now. It's past midnight, it's about 12:30. Catch the workers' boat to Murano, which I had been dropped off earlier that day, had been brought to my place, deposited in suitcases. I get left off at a different stop, the workers' stop. It's late, it's dark, there's a moon. I'm like, I have no idea where I am. I don't even have an address. So I'm like, okay, the moon. Turn left, turn right, start walking. I don't know how it came to be, but then I saw a tree in moonlight, and I said, that tree was outside where I stayed, and to stay. It was my first night there. Sure enough. So I call this Luna Guardian, the Moon Guardian. And it's like this idea that if you look and you trust, it's like that fifth element, the ether, the essence that somehow you will manage. Otherwise, I was going to sit at a Vaporetto stop until morning. I mean, it had to be two choices, right? So that's how this came to being. And I was told that people are really curious about how I make these things. So I'm actually going to tell people how I make these things. And you'll have to tell me if you think that's interesting at all. I used to try to just talk about content. But this is how I start. So I have a circle of plexiglass. I paint on the front and on the back. And people think my work is so beautiful and organized, right? Very orderly. It starts like that. People think I know where I'm going with the work. No. It's a sensed out thing. I have ideas. I have sketches. I live through the work. I work with it until it answers back at me. So here you can see that I'm working on the back. It's cradled with wood. So I'm painting both on the top and the bottom of the plexiglass, back and forth. And now you can see that I'm starting to generate a pattern that's going to make a rim. And you might say, well, why do you have those rings or these rims? The middle always references the void or the unknown, the thing I'm trying to come to terms with or understand, the thing outside of my grasp, the liminal state. The outer ring is the portal, the threshold to that. That outer ring is organic and biological, references my place, my body, or us. And if you think about us, I think everything is all interconnected. So if you go back to the singularity of the Big Bang, we're all tethered to that singularity. I'm sure people have said to you that you're connected because we're all stardust, which is true. But we all are of the same vibrations, the vibrations that initiated billions of years ago. And I think about these things by making the work. And I listen to NPR all the time. So I make the ring, I go around, I draw on silver point first, and then I put washes in graphite washes and different other pigments, and I heighten with white paint, and then sometimes go back in with silver point. And here we come to Agnes Martin, probably one of my favorite artists, because if you ever see a piece of hers for real, it shimmers. And this idea of shimmer is important to me. I used to think that my work was about not coalescing and not dissolving, that the space in between. But I think more so it's about this location of shimmer or vibration, where you can't quite discern what it is, but you look closer. And she talks about, it's not about perfection, it's about the perfection you can form in your mind. So people have said to me, your work looks so perfect. And that's so funny to me because I, of course, see all the imperfection. But by perfect, I think they think, oh, it looks so tidy. And by perfect for me, when I criticize myself, it's because it's not tidy enough. But I stop a work when it feels perfect, when it feels right. And that's the perfection that she's talking about. That at that point, It is its own world. It's complete unto itself. Its logic is held entirely in the piece itself. There is nothing outside of it. Then it's perfection. Which also sounds really outrageous that I just said I could make a whole world, but we'll let it go. Okay, so the work is not about what is seen, but what is known. So it's a felt sense, an embodied sense. And this is the domain of art, because scientists really can't stay in a felt sense. They have intuition because of their deep learning. They come to ideas out of dreams, but in the end they have to prove it. I have the luxury of not having to repeat my worlds. And that's the final piece, and it's upstairs. So this quote I will read to you. The poetic quality of the work depends on the fact that its creator is motivated by forces and drives of which he is unaware. A great artist is an unwitting alchemist. He explores the memory of an archetypal world without realizing it. It is not the artist who creates a symbol, quite the contrary. It is the symbol that imposes itself on the artist. So as I developed as an artist, trying to sort myself out, early on I realized I had to unmediate myself from outside of expectations, family expectations, even my own expectations, to try to figure out who I was in an unmediated way, which Paul Clay spoke about it as making work as if you were a child, but with the experience of being adult. And so it's to let go of thinking what the work should be and letting the work be what it needs to be. So a recent show that I had that started to reference that space between the known and unknown was at the Sarasota Art Center. I called it Thin Spaces. A thin space is an uncanny space. It's a spooky space. And so I think of it as the space that I actually like to reside in, so much so that I try to go to places that might elicit or precipitate that in me, would catalyze work because of that feeling. And it's a somewhat unsettling feeling. And so one of the pieces in that show is called Primordial. And you have the Mammatus clouds, and you have the kind of steaming sea, totally fecund. Every possibility is present there. I read a lot, but not as much as I wish, because I'm always in my studio working too. But these are kind of some of the things that I read. And so at this time, I'm starting to read these books. And I believe like things lead you to the next things. There's a great deal of trust in my work. So I'm reading, and one thing will lead to the next. So when I was reading Black Hole Blues, it led me to Vera Rubin, who is an astrophysicist credited with really pioneering work in dark matter. And that led to Maria Mitchell. Maria Mitchell, early American astronomer who is known for being really the mother of astronomy education, went to Vassar, and Vera Rubin knew this history, and she saw that a woman, not only could she be an astronomer, but she could also then be a member in the prestigious scientific organizations of the day. So Vera Rubin, how many people know of Vera Rubin? Oh, yay! My partner does. Okay. She is so worth looking into. Amazing, amazing scientist. So she went and studied astronomy because of Maria Mitchell. Now, in reading about Maria Mitchell, I learned that Maria took a group of people to see the eclipse, and she took them to Denver. In those times, you had to get on a train, you had to put all your telescopes on a train, and I thought if it was worth her while to do that, certainly I could go see the eclipse of 2017. So I texted my friend at University of Miami, and I said, we've got to go. And so we arranged a trip, and we flew to Omaha, and with it, we had to be back to teach. So we had a 24-hour window to drive to the North Platte River, see the eclipse, get back to the airport, just made it like that. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to do this because people say there's something to this. It was so unbelievably captivating that it led to a whole body of work, which you'll see upstairs. Another book that I think is worth reading, and it's at a popular science level, it's very readable, is this book called Mapping the Heavens by, by Premavada Natarajan, okay? Premavada. Anyways, I heard her speak on NPR. This is what I mean about things coming at you, and I thought, I'm going to read that book. I read that book. Great book. I'm going to reread it. I still don't quite get everything, but she is bringing all these scientists together through these times, talking about how you move through these thinkers to our understanding of the world today. And it's really beautifully written. So Maria Mitchell, it's a quote from her, that struck in my head, and I thought, she gave her life to this, looking at the stars, trying to understand her place within them, and leading the next generation of scientists, primarily women, to become what were then called the Harvard Computers. And the Harvard Computers were a group of women who worked for the Harvard Observatory doing all the calculations so they could do planetary orbits. And Maria Mitchell was known for the orbit of Venus. She was the first woman hired and paid to do that for the US government, which is very striking. But when the Harvard Observatory started, with Pickering as a director, he had a limited budget. So he's like, who can I hire? Well, gosh, there were so many women with amazing degrees, super bright, and there was no jobs for them. Because even at that time, while it wasn't really encouraged to get that kind of education, women still did, but they couldn't get employed. So the low pay that women could exact from the economy at the time made them the perfect people to work for the Harvard Observatory. And they did all of the foundational research that led us to what we understand about mapping our world and the universe today. And so one person, for example, was Henrietta Swan Leavitt, who did Leavitt's Law, which allows us to understand, well, Hubble picked up on it, but that there's things outside that, like how far things are. I mean, people didn't have a grasp on how far things are. That there's galaxies beyond our galaxy, which is pretty earth-shaking. So, I'm standing on the North Platte River in August of 2017, knowing I have to teach the next day. And in the span of a couple minutes, it turns that dark as the shadow passes over me. I had read many people's accounts. Virginia Woolf wrote about her account of it. Many writers write about their account of it. So I figured I had this down. I understood it. I knew what scientifically was happening, but I fell backwards. I lost my grounding. It was so otherworldly and unsettling to me. And it was profoundly moving to see Venus pop out on my right hand. So on my left was day, on my right was night, in the middle was this black disk, which was the total eclipse, and then Venus. Profoundly shocking event. I couldn't grasp it. It was ungraspable. So after that, I realized I was going to have to make work about it until I came to terms with it. So, I did my research. I like that title of the book is about the invisible, exploring the invisible. That's what my table in my studio looks like often. Books, sketches, work accumulating for shows, hopefully. Here's another view of my studio. I need a bigger one. I'm putting that out into the ether. And now I'm making the work for this show. And when I first started making the work for the show, I began by actually depicting the eclipse itself. What did it look like to me? The quality of the light. So I actually have images that are of the eclipse. And then I moved to actually exploring and communicating the quality of the light and how that felt. So here's how a piece starts. Just pour these washes. Then I start drawing in silver point. And then I pour more washes. And you can see the eclipse almost in totality. It's a little crescent. And I don't know if you can see the tiny little marks of the silver point. Silver point works really well for me. Silver point is a silver wire that you draw with. It doesn't lift up through layers of paint, which is of advantage. You can sharpen it really fine and it doesn't dull that quickly, which is also an advantage. It also changes chemically according to the surface it's on, so it can go bluish or brownish. There's totality. And in each of these, I'm trying to understand the quality of the light and the light as it surrounded me. So how I begin. This is the face called the diamond ring, where you get the Bailey beads or just a little bit of light. And I just got it this week, but it just came out on the cover of the International Drawing Annual. So there's the pile of books, which is pretty cool. And this is the piece that I felt ultimately most successfully captured the colors and the quality of the light of the eclipse. And it was the final eclipse painting that I made, which then led me to be making these pieces. So these pieces were not about depicting the eclipse, but they were about expressing what that felt like in a very open way. I will tell you this, I didn't get to this age, over 60, and not get to a point where I'm saying, I don't have to justify everything that I make or do. And I don't have to explain it all. And it doesn't have to have this, definable meaning. Because I make what I need to see. And so I privilege that. And I've worked really hard to come up with ways of working that make sense to me. And so on these, I really gave the privilege over to it being what it needed to be and not justifying all the visual decisions that I made. At this point, I started to become really interested in black and the quality of black and black pigments and how do you get depth and structure in black or in darkness. So the idea again of night vision. And I'm also thinking about things that I'm reading concurrently. So again, like we're all made out of stardust, which is a wonderful poetic thing. And so this detail can show you all the little hatching lines, which are the silver point. And then it can show you maybe the little speckly stuff in the upper right, which is actually stainless steel. So using different pigments. I do watch a lot of science fiction movies too. Umbra, which means shadow. I'm now what's considered an umbraphile, a shadow seeker. I say, my earlier work was lighter in tone, maybe like morning. And now my work is like night, or getting there. And I'm hoping it's not just an age thing. But I also hope it's not just the times we live in, that there seems to be like a heaviness about our lives in some ways. If you watch the evening news, that sort of wears on you. I hope instead that the work goes beyond that to saying that there's something so beautiful about our collective energy and these vibrations. So darkness not being negative at all. There's a detail, and you can see all these kind of little shapes appearing in the darkness, which could be like a primordial soup. So you know that maybe something else is going to happen, which is profoundly exciting. Especially when the Higgs boson might just flips out of existence, right? People read about this stuff. If it came from a singularity, we could go back to a singularity, right? I don't know. Okay, so again, how do I start? I start by just sort of sketching, and this is on the panel itself, and I'm just sketching with some diluted paint and silver point, and then I start moving along, and then sometimes NPR says something really interesting, and I jot it down. I don't have paper, I don't know why. So embedded in these panels underneath the really dark centers are, notes. Probably it said I needed to read Black Hole Blue, something like that. So this is how they start. If they started in a much more orderly way, they would probably take less time, but they're felt out. They're much more intuitively dealt with. And so in a way, I call it doing it really in a stupid way, where it takes me a lot of time to cover up for all the things I did wrong. But in that process, I'm just breathing the work, and I'm with the work. And also, I don't want to know how it's going to come out. Like, I don't want to go into a work understanding what it's going to be, because then the mystery is gone, and I'm not going to feel alive. I'm going to feel like a producer. And so I always want to be on this side of maybe it's just going to be a mess. But I do manage to clean them up. Now you can see the piece in the center there with the dark ring, which is now upstairs, and you'll see how that progresses. So now it's on the right, and you see how I just flung some white paint all over it? And now I've eaten up into that black ring with white paint and silver point. And then that's the piece that's upstairs. And I'm thinking about space as rebounding and generous, really fecund and full of life. Detail that shows all the silver point hatching on those lobes. People say, where did those kind of shapes or forms come from? The intestines. You think, why? Why intestines? Intestines are the symbol of the journey through life. So much of my work will make reference to kind of old symbol systems. This piece is not in the show. It's hanging up at my house. It's Miss Mitchell's comet. And the comet's coming, and she saw a comet. She discovered a comet. She was the first to see it. And then the King of Denmark gave her a medal for it. So it's a really important thing. And anyways, a comet, it's just dust and rock and dirt and snow, ice, compacted. And you see the flares around it because it's steaming off. It's like sublimating, right? So the ice sublimates to the gas. And in this case, that's what I'm trying to represent. So you can see a detail of that as it's coming towards you. I like to think of it as a revelation, or it's coming straight for me. This piece is called Nebula, which is the location where stars are born, which is then a birthing ring, or the location of all. This idea of dust to dust, So that's where we're going to go back to, and that's where we came from. And so I had this lovely review written about the show upstairs, and he mentioned that there's not a single pixel in my work that references the human scale or a human, for that matter. And I think that I love the review, so I think there's truth to that. However, I will say that scales are interesting things. I don't think in local time scales in my work, or in even scales that relate to the world we normally live in. So I think in larger scales, but I think in those, it doesn't matter. In those scales, we're all part of it. This is the thing, is we're all so interconnected. We're never not part of it all. So I never think of myself separate from it. And also in all this work, the hatching lines is like saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, right? Leaving my mark, letting it be known in a very persistent way. And then we have the star field in the center. So these domes have lights housed inside. People say, how do you get the lights to show? I paint black where I don't want light to come through. That's the first thing I do, is I paint the black where I don't want light to come through. Once it's done, then I paint white so that I can draw on it. So it's a bit of an obsessive process, and it takes a bit of time. This is another large dome upstairs, and I did this for the Harvard computers because they offered so much to me in reading about their research and their lives, and also how networked they were with each other to get the information out and to inform each other what they were learning as they were doing star classification systems or Cepheid variables, whatever it was that they were doing. So each of those lobes I think of as almost like a Tower of Babel, of their summary of everything they know, and then they have like this like little lighthouse thing going on, right? And they network it out to all the other knowledge in the universe, and the center is it's the World Wide Web. And there's a detail, and this one is Margaret Harwood. People said, how did you figure out what scientists to honor? That was really difficult because there's so many women that could be honored and should be honored. So I had to narrow it down. And so through reading and research, decided which woman really struck me the most for a variety of reasons. Sometimes because of the impact that their research had, and sometimes because of their lives. So here is an artist statement that I wrote many years ago, and I think it still holds. Connection is fleeting. A pregnant belly distends towards a potential Big Bang. Macro and micro scales collide in intimate exchanges. The chaotic abyss rebounds. There are no answers, but you feel infinitely generous. All states are becoming and disintegrating. And I was asked specifically about this with the video in the center. And what the video in the center of this piece, and this piece is called Quintessence, which is the fifth element, the ether, the unknown. The video in the center is the video I took of the North Platte River along the bank of it during the eclipse, during the light of the eclipse. So as you watch the video and it goes dark, and then all of a sudden comes light again, that is the shadow the moon is casting on the earth, causing that from the eclipse. And I gave it a five-fold symmetry to match the five elements. And so if you looked at that video, it does this, but more slowly. Although, for everybody's patience, I did speed up the time on that video quite a bit, because I watch it in normal time. It's wonderful. But I didn't think anybody else would have the patience for that. So it really goes rather quickly. So you can see how much light was lost, and then boom. And when the light came out again, it had moved, and so it was quite different light. So it's very striking. How light changed, how depth perception changes, how the quality and color of the light affected everything. So now I'm jumping to what I spent the last spring doing. I wrote a grant in the fall to work with prints, because I never have. And I had a past graduate student, Kim Spivey, who's a printmaker, started a studio. Not only did she start a studio, but she got certified that it's non-toxic. So she went for training, holds a certificate, and she doesn't work with toxic chemicals, which means a lot to me. So I thought I'll write a grant and try to work with her. It would be like a win-win for both of us. And fortunately, I got the funding, and I call that my swerve, in honor of Michelle Obama, right? If you know that reference. So, swerve, printmaking. Oh my goodness, two things. First, techniques and materials and methods I hadn't done. Secondly, the shift in scale to these small, these are 12-inch squares of copper that I was working on. This has a hard ground on it, and so I would have to scribe into the hard ground to make the form. But then I had to think, well, how to make this new art material methods into work that looked like my own work. So I thought metaphorically it had to have the same layers or the same way of thinking about how I go about my work. So I had to start with flux and flow, or the chaos of life and nature. So I would do a soap ground plate, which I can't control. I can't control the outcome. And then I would make a center plate that would house how I want to map the unknown, because the center is going to be the unknown, and the perimeter or the rim around it is my location, or earth, or body. And you combine those are proof plates. But you start to combine them together, and hopefully when you go see the prints upstairs, you think they look like my work. But printmaking is a really fascinating process. And in doing this, I will also say, I do not know how to print a plate. I don't want to know how to print a plate. You know, you spend your life getting good at things, and there's things that I'm good at. Kim spent her life getting good at these other things, and I'm so thankful for that. So people should write grants and hire artists who know how to do things you can't do, and extend your reach that way, because you cannot learn everything, but your vision can be more expansive than what you know. So this was my excuse to go back to figure drawing. My MFA was in figure. I was a figure painter. Go figure. So it was really fun for me, because I do have this skill. I don't use it. And I did this drawing of Urania. Now, why Urania? Well, she's the muse of astronomy, but also Melville, as in Moby Dick, Melville referred to Maria Mitchell as the American Urania. Now, if you read deeper into that, there's other reasons for referring to her that way, because Urania was said to be in the middle, that her gender was not defined. So I like to say she's gender fluid, and so was Maria Mitchell. Maria Mitchell was the force that she was. She didn't bow to the gender of her time. So there's the plate being printed. Here is the proof. We have Ptolemy's universe, we have Copernicus. You have the books of knowledge that we built on to get to where we are now. But then around the perimeter, you have this banner, and on that are the names of 6 American women astronomers who profoundly changed our understanding of who we are. And then outside of that is the unknown. So in this case, Urania sits in the center and knows everything. And there's Kim Spivey, the printmaker, on the right, and Michelle Miller, her assistant. And I will tell you this, jump into a project and not know what it really means, and everybody learns a lot. So I had this idea of 7 prints, 3 plates each. That would be simple, had no idea. It was not simple. It was a very arduous project for everybody, but it was a project that pushed all of us to become better at what we did. So they're sorting out the additions now, and I'm signing the additions. Everything about this was fascinating to me, all these things I didn't know. And then I never stopped there with the project. I thought, okay, I have to put this suite of prints into a box, so then I had the box cover laser etched and built into boxes. Or there's the laser etching being done at FAU. Thankfully on a grant, FAU did support me with 2 grants for this project. And I just sold a suite, so now I've got all my expenses in the project finally covered. And there it is, laser etched, and then I filled it with silver paint. And then upstairs in the exhibition is what it looks like. We have a plexiglass box with the suite inside, and on top of the suite is a colophone that was done at IS Projects in Fort Lauderdale, which is an artist-run project space, printing space. So if you don't know of it, that's another space you want to check out. They do commercial jobs, and they do artist jobs. They make artist books, but they also, I think, print like wedding invitations. But they're a letterpress. Beautiful, beautiful place. So if you're ever down in Fat Village checking out an art show, stop at IS Projects. And they also have a little gallery affiliated with them, so they're a great supporter of the arts. So if you have any letterpress job you need done, they're great. And that's the information on the letterpress. And so here are the final prints. So Urania has been printed on top of the chaotic field. This is Maria Mitchell. That's the trajectory of Venus. In doing this too, I ran into some problems, and maybe some of you as artists have run into this yourself too, that you have these ideas and have these people you want to honor and you read the research, but you don't want to illustrate it. So there was a period of time where I got really confounded because I didn't want to illustrate. I wanted to have a sensibility that it was a conversation between us. So instead, these are not illustrations of their research, but a reflection of my honor of who they were as scientists. This is Henrietta Swan Leavitt. Annie Jump Cannon. She did star classification. This is Cecilia Gabgoshkin Payne. She really informed us on what are the percentages of elements like in the sun and the world, these are things that just weren't known. Things we take for granted now, though I'm sure most of you couldn't say how much hydrogen was in the sun, but Joe could. How much hydrogen is in the sun? What percentage?
You put me on the spot. I guess about 80%.
Yeah, so she was the one who figured these things out. Again, it's just like really earth-shaking work. Oh, Vera Rubin. She's really one of my favorites. You shouldn't have a favorite. But, when you have an idea like dark energy and dark matter, which constitutes the bulk of the universe, but we can't see it, and we really can't define it. That's fascinating to me as an artist. And, Jocelyn Bell Burnell. The name just went on my head. Pulsars. And the list could go on and on and on. So those are the prints. I'll talk just briefly about having a life with galleries, which I do. So on producing a show, say, for a museum, and I'm making my work, I'm also trying to manage a life as providing work to galleries. So being an artist is not for the faint of heart. You make sure you have a very good partner. That's really helpful. And you just, it's a thing where every day you wake up and you get to it. I'm actually going to fly to Taipei in 2 weeks, where I'm doing this exhibition where they're projecting my work in circles like a movie and doing yoga underneath it, which is really fabulous. And the show that I had there was about the parts of the universe, voids, filaments, anyways. So those are my galleries. Upcoming exhibitions. Rod Folds from University Galleries is here, and he was hanging it today, and he called me and he said this stuff is a real pain to hang, but he said it nicer than that. So these are ceramic vitreous porcelain that I made at Kohler during artist residency at Kohler Foundation, and I made these forms. And now you have the ocean filling up the last one. There is what my work will look like in Taipei should you come to do yoga. And next year in the fall, I'll have a show at the Ann Norton Sculpture Garden. So now what? That's always the dilemma for an artist when you put up a show, because in a way a show is a culmination of something. You're trying to get to some answer, at least for the moment. And I really was trying to come to terms with what I felt about the total eclipse and the light I experienced, and why did I feel so unsettled by it. I went to see the total eclipse in Chile in July 2nd, and I would say at that point I came full circle. So maybe I'm going to put a little of the eclipse behind me, hard to say. But what I did learn out of this experience is it's more the liminal experience that provides the catalyst for my work. And I want to reside in trying to understand things I don't understand. And so I choose to move towards that location. So I did just apply to go to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park because actually was finalist there, but it did erupt and they had to cancel. So that's a liminal location for me. I think it would be otherworldly. So what I think I'm moving towards now is dark energy. And that brings me to the large piece that's in the show, which was really the last piece I did complete. And it's for Rebecca Elson, who was an astrophysicist and poet. And I always think it looks like Doctor Who. Right? But what this piece leads me to is like how to see into darkness, how to give structure to darkness, and what is the dark matter around us, and why do I feel part of it? Or why do I have this sense that I am shimmering with all this energy out there? And why is my work still relating back to the Big Bang? And what is it about this umbilical tether to that singularity? So I think I'll be privileging more the abstract qualities of that in my work. But just to show you how this painting started, I just was pouring black paint. You see it leaning back there. That was like stage one-ish. That's what the surface looked like on another layer of pores, more pore, other pores. So just layering things up. And what I've learned is that no matter what I've made, even when it comes to a point where I stop learning from it, so I receive it as complete, that it could have been made a different way. So the next morning, what do I do but have to get up to make the next work? And so it's still progressing. And what I've realized from doing this exhibition at the Boca Art Museum is a realization that it's really about those vibrations, the echoes from billions of years ago, that my work is about, and how to communicate that more fully, more ravishingly, with less bounded sense to it, to open up to that, is where I think my work is heading. I look so tiny in that corner. That's what my life looks like on a daily basis when I'm in my studio. It's just lovely. And it comes down to, what is my boundary? If I am all and you're all, there is no boundary, right? So I hope that my work can communicate that. As well as I do hope that if you read those women's names, that you might look them up, at the very least on Wikipedia. But there is this marvelous book, and this really, again, brings me around full circle, and I just got this book and I'm reading it now. And in it, she weaves together the circle of all these people I've been reading about, these great women scientists, poets, and artists, and how their worlds crossed and intersected. It's a beautifully written book. She also has a blog, if you look her up online. And I show this image at every one of my talks because I really want to make a piece that's a dome, that large. This is at the Baton Rouge Museum of Art and Science, and they projected my work on the dome of the planetarium. And then I will end sort of here. So if you read that, you can see I'm standing there on the right looking at the eclipse in Chile. And this is the sort of thing that gives me hope when things can feel hopeless, to understand that life is resilient and life has many forms and transformation is possible. But I will also say that I am a citizen and I don't let go of the local scale in that regard, that I have a local responsibility to it, which comes down to decisions I might make in my life as they impact other people in our daily life. So vote, listen to NPR, read the paper. Nobody reads the paper anymore. So things to think about. And last slide, given over to Mariah Mitchell. The best that can be said of my life so far is that it has been industrious. And the best that can be said of me is that I have not pretended to what I was not. I hope to reach that point in my life as an artist so that my art will be purely unmediated and be a pure expression of what it feels like for me to be alive in this world with all of you. Thank you. So I've been told I can take some questions, and I like questions, so I'm nervous giving talks. Yes?
How do you make the lines so straight? I, as an artist, cannot do a straight line without shaking. How do you get the lines?
The lines look straighter than they really are. I would say that I do use a stick sometimes to describe a circle, and that I do own rulers. Don't use them a lot, but in some cases I do. But in the drawing part, it's a little more loose than you might think. But when I paint an edge or a curve, paint can nail an edge. Paint can clean up an edge. Because the softness of the hair in the brush wants to make that curve for you. And it's also a very Zen thing, a breathing thing. But yeah, I can hatch, and my hatches can be equidistant, like unless somebody walks in the room. It's just practice. Any other questions? Well, I want to recognize that Logan Bateman, he wrote the essay for the catalog that's going to come out this fall. He's in the audience, and his essay almost made me cry. So, yeah.
You said something interesting, because it's a creative impulse, but it's also a spiritual drive. And you said, I like to make, kind of innocent, I think you said, I like to try and make what I'm looking for with no preconceived. So it's like it's coming forth on your journey to find something.
Yeah, there's this idea that it's from a wisdom tradition that you rise in the morning to seek yourself, and you walk the whole day, which references your life. You walk your entire life seeking, 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 only to come back and see yourself. So in art, that's what you're doing.
Right.
When you see yourself reflected, you've arrived.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see your journey as a continuous process, which is basically your subject matter. It's a continuing, infinite body of work that, it's an ensemble of your research that has to do with your love for space and mystery. And of course, the human space and mystery too.
Yeah, the idea of the mystery. I don't particularly seek answers. I like living in the questions or the mystery, and it's a really beautiful life. What I've learned more recently is that I can and will trust more in my work. However, I still believe that I need a catalyst or precipitator, which is reading the work of other people, because they can distill things in me that are so, I just kind of swarm with them in bliss.
Yeah.
Rapturous.
Yeah.
Any other? Yes.
Do you have another medium you're thinking about going to, like the ceramics and printmaking, and I think you did glass blowing as well, so
Right.
one.
That's a great question. Whenever you think you're getting good at something, you should try something else, because it brings new things into you. But also I teach, and I'm really fortunate for that. So it's in teaching that I'll tell people what to do, and they will always not do it. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, there's another way of thinking. So students, the way that they go about problem solving and making work breathes new life into me all the time. So making it maybe less necessary to be seeking new things sometimes. However, my mind likes problem solving. So I was really curious about laser etching and CNC routing and 3D printing. So in another talk I gave at the Innovation Center, it was all about that, And I'm going to guess that some things might happen, but where my bliss is being in the studio completely by myself in my own world. And I think I still want to have control of my world. So it's a little hard to let it go over to maybe say Kim Spivey, whose energy was profoundly perfect for mine. I'm not sure you can make that body of work with a printmaker who had a different energy. Her energy was perfect for my energy. So she was the best supporter, organizer, and she never appeared breathless. After everything was done, she did tell me it was really hard. Anything else? Well, thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate that you took the time to listen to me talk about my work.